Okay, I think we're ready. Are we on? Okay, great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is the student, this is not. This is the, I was gonna do it so, I was gonna be on top of everything tonight. This is the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd. This is the first day of school, so officially welcome back to everybody. I will start with verification that the meeting was properly posted.
Yes.
Thank you. And our first action tonight is to seek approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the August 5th, 2025 meeting.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zenobia. Any corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, we're now at the point in our meeting where we have an opportunity for public comment. We have one speaker tonight. Because we have 6 speakers or less, speakers will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and to be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the public here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium should be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phone. Our speaker this evening is Paul Reese.
Last week, Thursday, Dan O'Donnell brought up on his show about the potential school shooter at Les Paul Middle School, and he made a claim that it was swept under the rug to cover up the fact that this was a transgender individual, and proceeded to offer zero evidence that that was done. I've been coming here for, 15 years. I imagine you've had a few expulsions in that time, but I've never heard of one in the entire time I've been here. I imagine there was probably some juicy things, but that never came up. So for him to make a claim that this he said the administration, and I don't know if he was talking about the central office administration or the administration at Les Paul, because my wife took it 2 different ways. So it was quite the claim to make with zero evidence that somehow you guys have handled it differently. You have to give me, if you're going to make that claim, you have to show me that there would be a different way you would have handled it, that someone intentionally did this. And there was, I saw nothing. And if someone's going to make a claim that I'm like speaking up for someone that suffers from a mental illness and try to justify that, that's not the case. I do believe that they suffer from some mental illness, that they have a delusion. I think there's a lot of that goes around. In 1962, this country decided to make a venture to get away from God, that it was going to remove God from our school. And it made claims that we were going to be a better society, a more intellectual society, a more learned society, if we just leave these silly notions of the past behind. I don't see any evidence that that ever happened. That what the intellects, the ungodly, claimed to happen did not happen. They have no evidence that life came from matter. To this day, they can't show you where life came from, much less how we ended up with 2 sexes in life. It's just things that just don't exist, that they claim to exist, and have offered no proof, but have damaged society so much that we can't even talk to one another anymore. We almost speak 2 completely different languages. And this was because we turned our back on God. We decided that He didn't exist, but man will do what's right in his own eyes. And it hasn't led us anywhere good. And nobody's making a push to end this. It's a crying shame. Our kids are lost. They have no meaning, no purpose in life. You know, we don't have children anymore, which were the main purpose, which, when I was young and single and I ran around, I thought I was having a good time. I didn't know what one was. say, I'm not sticking around here tonight. I'm going to go home and play catch while the sun still shines, because that's what's fun, you know. And,
2 minutes.
yeah, it's too bad we've lost our way, you know, in this world, because we're left dealing with this garbage instead of just enjoying what life has to offer. And I somehow wish it would change. But anyways, thanks.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 topics tonight under other business. We're skipping over our content areas this evening. We don't have any content areas to cover this evening. And we're going to begin with an update on gifted and talented. So we have Jamie.
Actually, before we do that, can we do discussion and possible
Oh, geez.
action on the policy?
I'm really on top of things tonight, yeah.
It's just under general business,
Sorry,
but we
yes,
can fast forward if you
discussion.
like and
Thank
come
you.
back to
No,
that.
Thank you. Discussion and possible action on policy 2464, programs for gifted and talented students.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for introducing the topic, and Jamie Hensel, our Director of Academic Student Services, is here tonight to share a little bit more about not only the policy, but as we get into other teaching and learning topics, a little bit more about gifted and talented. For tonight, with policy 2464, programs for gifted and talented, we wanted to bring forward the recommendations that Neola had provided. We're bringing this forward. This is a replacement policy and includes new provisions based on the state-based statutory language and administrative regulations from the Wisconsin DPI. This policy was developed with the assistance of the Wisconsin Association for Talented and Gifted, or WATAG. So overall in the policy, and I'll bring it up here, you have it there where you can see the strike-throughs. But like I said, this is really written as a replacement policy, first and foremost around the title, moving to advanced learners from gifted and talented. As they get into the policy itself, then everything in red that you see here on this very first part, they would recommend eliminating, and then giving a little bit more robust description around the policy for advanced learners. You'll see here on page 2 that it gets into specific areas of identification as well as instruction and documentation and evaluation. Those are the 3 main areas for the policy. So with that, I'm going to open it up for conversation. We haven't made any adjustments to it, but we're open to conversation. And then later tonight, we have an update for you around all things gifted and talented.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. So I believe last year when we did the update on our gifted and talented program, one of the things that we noticed or had highlighted is that it had really kind of fallen on the wayside in the terms specifically regarding identification. And so in taking a look at the update, that we would be identifying them in kindergarten through grade 12 in one of the 5 areas. I believe the previous is that we were trying to do this by 3rd grade, 3rd or 5th grade. Is that correct? Is that if they weren't identified by 3rd or 5th grade, that they were effectively then just not? So if we're changing that, I'd like to understand then what we're doing, the frequency of that, because I like where that's at, that we're identifying those who are going to be potentially high achievers in any one of these areas, that is done not just in the early stages, and then if they didn't, then they kind of fell behind. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so the statute is kindergarten through grade 12 is what we're supposed to be looking at for identification. I think we focused around the end of like 2nd grade, 3rd grade in the past. So we would, again, be continuing to really focus our efforts, and I'm going to talk more tonight, too, about what we're doing in identification to really make sure that we get those early learners.
So I just have a question in saying that, does it make sense to have the update on what we're going to be doing prior to kind of reviewing this or in conjunction with, so that I can see the full picture before approving a policy?
Sure.
I think I may have subconsciously moved us ahead. I think it would be helpful, and part of the reason is because in all of the green that's added here was the recommended update that was provided by Neola.
Correct.
Correct. I don't think what they are recommending helps us in any way to serve our gifted and talented students. I think it's a lot of narrative that doesn't get to the specific policy requirements that we have. And I think there's even some inconsistency where it says like, the board shall direct the superintendent. Well, it's a board policy. So if we're writing a board policy, it should be saying that the superintendent shall. And there's some redundancies. But I think it may be difficult to sift through replacing a bullet list with 2 pages of paragraphs unless we kind of get a focus on what is the status of the program and maybe where are the opportunities that we have. I guess that's where I'm at. And so if we could just have maybe, we don't need a motion or anything, but if we have a collective agreement to maybe hold this topic until we get through the update, and then we could talk about maybe what we want to do with the policy, if that's okay. Any concerns about that? Okay.
Another option too, we can come back tonight and discuss it, and also at a future board meeting too, for more discussion. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll switch over to the gifted and talented update. So we have 2 people joining us. So I am excited to introduce Leslie Waltz, who is our secondary math coordinator, who you guys have seen before. She's been an instructional coach throughout the system, has her hand in dual language as well. But new, we have Rachel Borio, who is our elementary math coordinator. So both of them have been working with others throughout the system with gifted and talented. So tonight with Jamie, they'll be sharing a little bit of more detail around what it looks like at the elementary and secondary level, especially in math in the area of advanced learners.
All right. Well, I'm excited to be here tonight to give you guys an update as far as what's been going on in the world of gifted and talented, otherwise known as advanced learning. So tonight we have 4 main objectives for you. The first one being giving an overview of what's called a multi-level system of support, or MLSS, and how we use this to help us identify our gifted and talented learners, as well as provide programming. So I'm going to explain that a little more in depth and just kind of give the big picture of how that all helps us to identify and offer programming. Secondly, we'll talk more specifics about programming and what options we provide in our district. And we are going to talk through 3 specific examples, one at the elementary, one at the middle, and then again at the high school level. So we'll talk more specifically as well about our identification procedures. And then we're going to spend some time lastly talking about resources for our families and our staff, some next steps as far as continuous improvement and where we are looking to continue to grow in this area, and provide just some updates to you as far as what professional development has been provided to date. All right, so we're going to jump into what is a multi-level system of support. So many of this may sound very familiar to you. So a multi-level system of support, otherwise known as RTI, Response to Intervention, or MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. Oftentimes these words are used interchangeably. So there are some essentials when we're looking at what is a multi-level system of support. So it is a framework for providing high-quality, research-based, and differentiated instruction. So one of the important things about an MLSS is it's really about matching student needs to matching the programming or services based on those identified needs. And there are various ways that we can do that. It's ensuring that we have a viable and guaranteed curriculum and one that provides high-quality instruction. We frequently monitor progress, which helps us to inform the instructional decisions we make about student learning. And it's multi-tiered. So we have a continuum of support, so you'll hear me reference that a lot tonight as far as the services we provide for our students who have advanced learning needs. And multi-level system of support includes tiers of support, which is what I'll go over now. So Tier 1 is our universal tier or a level of support. So think of this as approximately 80% of our students are going to respond quite well and just need Tier 1 universal support. So primary needs are often met through the regular classroom. Differentiation is provided, and oftentimes this is actually, in fact, provided by the classroom teacher. So there are a few programming examples that are listed on this slide. This is by no means an exhaustive list. These are just a couple of examples that we have up there. So you can see some of them include flexible grouping, differentiated instruction and assignments, and independent projects. We know, however, that we have some students that are going to need additional supports. So this is where Tier 2 or targeted support comes in. Tier 2 is on top of Tier 1, not in replace of. So this includes a smaller percentage of students, so some numbers are estimates around 10%. And this includes primary needs that become more specialized in programming. So again, there are a few examples that are listed on this slide, such as independent projects or study, again, flexible, possible cluster groupings. Again, this is by no means an exhaustive list. These are just examples. Now we know that we have additional students, a smaller percent of students, so maybe 1 to 5%, again, those are estimates in number, who may need an additional layer of support. So at this level, the Tier 3, it becomes more individualized. So this is for students that really, they have needs that go beyond grade level curriculum. So programming examples here might include acceleration, distance learning options, post-secondary options, maybe a compacted curriculum. So at this level, this is when we're saying what's called a differentiated education plan, or a DEP, would be written for a student. So we'd be saying that we have an advanced learner who meets identification criteria at Tier 3 and is therefore in need of a specialized plan written for them. So we are now going to talk through those 3 examples. So I'm going to have Rachel go over an example at the elementary of what programming can look like.
So at the elementary level, when a student's identified as gifted and talented, they have opportunities for extension during math application time and also during that intervention block. Another additional thing that is given to them is a unit assessment prior to the unit being taught. And if they show proficiency within all of those content standards before that instruction, they would also be able to participate in those accelerated type activities during universal instruction on 2 of the days. Our new curriculum, iReady, has a cyclical process where it starts with an explore day and then it moves into develop days and then a refine day. So our gifted and talented students would not participate in that universal instruction on explore and refine days. However, we would want them to participate during those develop days because the conversation and the mathematical discourse is really important for them to be making connections to their peers and their peers to be seeing their strategies as well. So that allows for that further extension above and beyond just that extension during application time. And then additionally, teachers would be checking in on the students, the gifted and talented, 1 to 2 times a week, and that would be things such as introducing one of those tasks, checking on the progress, or even facilitating conversations between our GT students if we have multiple within a grade level.
All right, and I'll speak a little bit about an example at the middle school. We created in the last couple of years a compacted pathway that allows students to go from 5th grade into a process where they take the 3 years of middle school math in 2 years by doing 6th and 7th grade as 6th graders, is about half of 7th grade, then 7th, the other half, and 8th as 7th graders, and then they take integrated math 1 as 8th graders, and then join integrated math 2 at the high school level. This is something that we are offering not only to students who have qualified for gifted and talented, but really for any student that has shown that they are an advanced learner, and we have a pretty robust process for identifying those 5th graders. We start looking at their data even in the spring of 4th grade. So we look at all the work that they have been doing at the elementary, and then we move and we invite them to be a part of Math 6-7. Just to give you some numbers, the first year we did this, in 24-25, we had 75 students invited to be part of Math 6-7. Out of those 75, 14 had a GT flag, and so they are moving on now to 7-8. And then this year, we have 105 students that were invited into 6-7. We have seen tremendous growth from iReady, and so we have more students that have qualified to be part of this compacted pathway. We also have some exceptional situations. They are very rare. It's what Jamie was mentioning as that tier 3, very personalized. We had 2 students last year, 2 students this year that from 5th grade went directly into Math 7-8. This is very rare, and we had to consult a lot to make sure that it was a right move for these students, but they were at that level where it was beyond. 6-7 was a great tier 2, but they were ready for the next level. So that's something that we are doing at the middle school.
All right, and then at the high school level, one example is the offerings that we have for our advanced placement courses. So there are a few statistics here on the slide, and just to show how many offerings we do have. So last school year, we offered 27 AP courses out of 1,535 students. 1,985 AP tests were taken. 75% scored a passing rate of 3 or higher. Our advanced psychology course was the highest. Then our highest pass rate was advanced placement in calculus at a 95%. 13 out of 27 surpassed the Wisconsin pass rate. And we are excited to announce that we have that new AP business with personal finance happening as well this year. So when we talk about identification, so nominations can come at any point throughout the school year. So there's a couple different pathways that happen with identification for gifted and talented. So nominations can come from students themselves, parents, and or staff at any time. So one of the things we do within our system, and which again goes back to that MLSS that I described earlier, is really the systematic review of our data during what's called our universal screening meetings and our team meetings. So our teams meet to review data at least like 3 times a year in what's called these universal screening meetings. So they're looking at academic data, they're looking at behavioral data, and then team meetings also happen frequently at the building level. So what is happening during these meetings is teams are looking at academic data, They're determining if students are responding to Tier 1 instruction through some of the progress monitoring and the assessments that we use. And we're really using that information to determine if our students are requiring more or additional targeted needs. So like I said, that data is continuously being evaluated and monitored throughout the school year. One of the other things that I've been doing is looking at our rates of identification. So these numbers from 25, 26, so obviously the year has just started, so these are very, very fresh numbers, is currently at a 3.4%. So when I look at the 5 different areas of identification, our top 2 areas of identification are math and general intellect, followed by creativity, leadership, and then the visual and performing arts. And that's pretty consistent when I look past the last 3 years. That trend pretty much holds steady.
I'm just going to jump in here too and just say too, like in the past, we haven't always had such a tight structure around the identification, which Ms. Kozlowski, you had referenced earlier. And so over the last couple of years, what we've done is really made the process for looking at student data for acceleration and intervention is similar, and it's happening. We're looking at all students at this time, and that's where we're like, who needs additional intervention and who needs additional acceleration. And so combining efforts when we have the teams around the table to talk about that, and then even the behavior components has been super helpful just to streamline the work in the system throughout all of our schools.
One of the things that I'm very excited to announce is we will be engaging in a pilot as one of our goals to increase our identification of students. We will be piloting a new assessment with a couple of our elementary schools to do some screening, and we are hoping that by use of this assessment tool, we're going to learn a little more about it and see if it helps us to identify students at a higher rate. All right, so our final slide for tonight is just looking at some of the things that have been put together for, as I mentioned earlier, for our families and our staff. So we currently have a Gifted and Talented District webpage, and we have a couple things on that web page. So you can kind of see in this screenshot here. So department contacts, if parents are looking for who to reach out to and contact. Our gifted and talented resources. So what we do when we come across gifted and talented opportunities for our families, we post these on our website. So families can reference this if they're looking for certain activities or if there are things in the area. As we get them, we try to post them here for our families. Additionally, our school psychs in the building, when they get information about opportunities, they will send an email blast out to our families as well for additional opportunities that might be out there and available. The other thing we have on our website is our updated Gifted and Talented Programming Guide. So this guide includes a lot of the things that I've mentioned here tonight. It also gives specifics about our identification procedures, what we use, which is a multiple assessments that we use to identify in the district to really create what's called a student profile. So we use quantitative data, we use qualitative data, so surveys, information from parents. We use assessment data that's varied. We use performance or portfolios of student performance. So we really use a multitude of ways to identify students. Also in the updated programming guide, there are nomination forms. So a parent could fill that out if they wanted to nominate their student for possible identification. And towards the back of the programming guide, there are also additional resources such as books and websites that parents can access. And there's a frequently asked questions guide that walks parents through some of the typical questions that I often get. As far as next steps, so we continue to engage in memberships. We're part of the Partners Advancing Gifted Education. We're also members of the Wisconsin Association for Talent and Gifted, so we attend that conference. We will continue to review and monitor our identification procedures and our programming options. So you heard me mention, as I went over our rates, that's something I'm taking a look at, and we continually are reassessing how are we providing programming. And again, going back to that continuum of options, are we making sure we have that continuum of options? And once we identify student needs, we're really making sure that those needs are matched to what programming is appropriate for that student. We continue to provide professional development on the early identification. So for starting out with our earliest learners, we want to really make sure we identify them early. We have provided some professional development around characteristics of advanced learners, as well as instructional and programming options, and writing those plans. So what is a good DEP, and how do we know what's in there? So we've had some recently, during our Summer Institute, some professional development around writing those plans. And I mentioned already our universal screening pilot, so I'm excited to see where that goes as well. All right. So I'd like to go ahead and open up for any questions.
Mr. Zenobia, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. So really just a clarifying question. In the case of, and you use math as an example, we're really advancing kids up the ladder, up the grade level when they are showing that aptitude, and I would assume in other areas. So we're really only searching for a curriculum or a DEP for just a very small number of kids. Is that right? It's been 2 or 4?
Yeah, so a formal DEP or that, thank you. A formal DEP or that differentiated education plan would just be written for students at the Tier 3 level. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't provide supports for students who are showing advanced learning characteristics. We would still show or provide programming options and things and provide services for them. It's just not written into that formal plan.
And does the curriculums that we have, for the most part, cover those areas where we're not having to write a lot of extra for those? We have the framework, in other words, of curriculum in place that's meeting most of these needs. We just have to get a little creative in some
Yes,
cases.
yeah, so most of our students will respond to our universal curriculum, but we know that we'll still have those additional students who will need a little bit more, and then those students on top of that who will need even more than that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I actually want to piggyback on to Mr. Zenobia a little bit. So a lot of what we talk about when it comes to just curriculum and the teaching and learning path for our students is just the services that we can provide for them. And so the elementary part I understand, but then we get into the middle school and the high school, and I want to go specifically to where we're identifying a 5th grader that could operate at a 6th, 7th, 7th, 8th. And how are we getting that instruction to them? Because they're now, so now this is the wraparound service, right? So now I'm crossing buildings and instruction within the framework of that. And this to me is an area, I mean, we're talking a lot about a lot of different things lately, but it's the services and the wraparound for the students to meet them where they're at and get them that. Can we walk through some of
Yes.
how we're doing that?
I will start by clarifying that we are not putting 5th graders in the 6, 7. When we invite them when they finish 5th grade, in the spring of 5th grade, actually it's around February, that we invite them and we say, next year when you enroll in middle school, you will be in a 6, 7 class. So the invitation starts with middle school, and we have middle school sections for 6, 7. For example, at Butler this year, we have 2 sections of 6, 7. At Horning, we have 1. At Les Paul, we have 2, I believe. And so we have sections that teach the 6, 7, and those same students, that same cohort moves into the 7, 8. If a student should move into the district in the 6th grade, and they're coming from a similar program, then we would look at their data, make sure that it is going to be a good fit, and then we would place them in there, even if they come in as 7th graders. So we're not really making students cross buildings. This is for middle schoolers, but the verification of the data and the invitation is made around January, February of their 5th grade year.
Okay, so then crossing to middle school, high school, where now I've got middle school superstars.
Yes. So we have middle school teachers who teach integrated math 1. We also have some middle school teachers that can teach integrated math 2, although that is very rare, and what we offer it as an e-achieve option really, because we really don't have the capacity for 1 or 2 students to hold a full class. And then when they get into high school, then they start at whatever course they have next. So we were just discussing this morning about students who are in integrated math 2, but they are 9th graders at the high school because they already took it at the middle school. So there's no transfer of buildings. We really have the capacity to teach within the building, teach those accelerated courses.
And I think that's a really key point on that. But there's going to be a point where, how do we get the services? Because even in an e-achieve, so if I'm thinking about a math is one of those classes that is often very hard in an e-achieve setting. And so how are we navigating all of those pieces? So I think your commentary was great. For now, I'm just thinking longer term, big picture. If we are really kicking this program off now, which means my identification is just starting to ramp up, my population of students identified is going to grow, and how are we making sure that we're meeting them where they're at to get them the services that they need? So I think that's forthcoming as to where we go. The other question that I really had was talking about the universal screening pilot. And the reason it just initially cuffed for me was it's another assessment that we're doing. And I'm looking at all of the curriculum that we put in that has exceptional assessments in there and tools that even we know with the iReady and whatnot is moving them along at the pace that they're at. How is this going to be different?
So this assessment does assess in a different kind of way. So this assessment doesn't necessarily rely so much on past knowledge, or there's some background knowledge that students would need to know, like numbers, things like that, but it relies less heavily on acquired knowledge. So it's really looking at problem-solving ability and potential in the moment. So it's more of a nonverbal type administered assessment. So it relies less on heavy use of language and, like I said, that acquired knowledge. Whereas our other assessments are really looking at our academic, your knowledge of what you've learned from the curriculum.
In the application, okay. And final, the identification process, we are really just building that, because a year ago, we were still early in that we were identifying and saying we're not calling out our students who are meeting those students who have exceptional pieces. Can we focus now on building in some metrics with this? I would like to understand how many students we have identified, at what grade level we're at, and where they're at. I would like to actually be able to see that progress and what we're doing to meet them and but I think that would be a great next step.
Yep, for sure. And that is information that I have, and I have looked at that for, like I said, especially the last 3 years. So, and we will continue to refine that. One of the things is, and we've been working really hard on this, is making sure that we have clean data when it's going into our system, and just making sure that we're reporting accurately. So that is something that we've been working very hard on.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I think a piece of our next step too is with the clean data is looking at our student information system, because we've enhanced our use of Infinite Campus, especially when it comes to student IEPs, and then even now health plans. And so it might be time to revisit the options that we have in our student information system, Infinite Campus, of what areas or what tweaks we can make to help with the data collection or collection of the plans, and easily have the data available by grade, by school, that sort of thing, by year.
Well, okay, so I'll start. I love the program guide. It's fabulous. and it hits all the things that I think when we were talking about the policy side of things, I think it makes it very easy for us to look at the policy and say, the superintendent shall develop a program guide that includes the following. And I think that's all captured there. There's an executive summary paragraph in the program guide that I think is kind of the policy that speaks to the administrative rule and the state statutes that apply. And I think Ms. Kozlowski already said this, that the two things that I wrote down were measurement and consistency. And since we've done so much work as a district to have universal curriculum, I think that allows us to be a little bit more consistent. And you mentioned just learning how to write these plans and do they look the same? And so a student at Hadfield who's identified has a plan and it's consistent with a student at Rose Glen who's identified, so that and they wouldn't be the same because every student is going to bring their own unique gifts and talents to their plan. But I think that that experience is something that we want to be universal along with our curriculum. So I think there's a lot of positives there. I think the screener, I guess I'd be open to seeing how the pilot goes and what you guys think makes sense. I do agree that, more testing for the sake of testing isn't necessarily going to help us make that decision. But if there's a threshold that we're looking for, and more important to me is that do teachers and parents and support staff know what they're looking for and know how to recommend someone to be evaluated. Because I think that happens sometimes, that maybe a student is overlooked because there's a behavioral issue, or they're overlooked because the parent maybe doesn't know that they should be asking. So I think just that consistency in how we're identifying and how we're evaluating, and then what those plans look like, so they're not different school to school. But I think the program guide itself is just a fantastic first step to having something that cuts across the whole district. And I think once kids get past middle school, they're kind of developing that plan on their own, right? As an individual, they're choosing the things that are actually going to challenge them, and we can guide them and push them and encourage them. But I think we have just a tremendous amount of advanced placement and accelerated options that give them, a little bit more control then around how they want their academic journey to be. So I think just reflecting back on where we were 3 years ago, this is, it's really very appreciated. Anything else? So did we want to maybe revisit the policy for a second, or even just have some discussion about what we want to do with the policy as a result of? I think we were talking about metrics. I think for me, a big part of the policy would be, from a board perspective, regular, if not at least annual, but possibly more frequently, updates on how we're doing with identification, how we're doing with progress. But the meat of what's on page 3 of the program guide feels a little bit like it kind of fulfills the policy. So I'm struggling a bit with a lot of the extra that Neola has put in the policy, because I'm not sure that it serves our purpose. But I guess I'd like to maybe try to lean that out a little bit so that we're just focused on the statutory requirements and then our specific priorities, which is striving for that consistency and metrics and some regular updating, at least to this committee, if not to the board on behalf of this committee, in terms of how we're doing. I don't know what the rest of the group thinks. Ms. Kozlowski?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I'd like to see the identification put back into bullet points, but also I think it needs a little bit more teeth as to the stuff that we're doing. This is a big shift from early identification to a lifelong career cycle identification, and how that's going in and how you present it on what we're doing, I think is extremely effective to document, like, this is the plan on how we are identifying. Here's the characteristics, there's 5, but how are we doing it, right? I mean, there's 3 to 4 times a year that we're assessing it. We're seeing things, and I think that's really important to call out.
We definitely have time, I mean, to play with it and bring it back. I think just having the conversation, giving the update of kind of where we've been, and some of our next steps is a nice win and celebration for us, but certainly more work to do. So we'll work on the policy behind the scenes and then bring it back next month for more discussion.
And before we wrap, I don't know if Ms. Koenig minds if I ask her a specific question, but just coming from the middle school perspective, were you ever faced with a situation where you had a 6th or 7th grader in your class who you observed being an advanced learner that maybe wasn't identified in elementary school or I'm just curious if that was something that you encountered.
Yeah, you can definitely encounter that because kids develop differently and at different times, and you've all heard the phrases, like a late bloomer. There are kids that, for whatever reason, things don't kick into gear until maybe upper intermediate, like, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And I know a lot of the identification was always focused on, like, by 3rd grade, they're kind of identified, or 5th grade, but sometimes the light bulbs can go on pretty brightly in 6th, 7th grade, but yet they weren't identified prior, but then all of a sudden, things do just ignite, but they're not identified, but that doesn't mean that teachers don't see that. A lot of times teachers will, give their own types of advancement or their own, extra projects because they recognize that, they can see that a student needs more. But no, I have seen it, and I wouldn't say it's common, but I have seen it where students just things just kick into gear in 6th, 7th grade. It just kind of snaps in for the kids. And maybe it didn't early.
Anecdotally, it feels like with me, if I'm talking to parents, like the writing skills kind of emerge in middle school, that maybe the reading and writing in elementary was just a little more elementary and skill-based when they start to write more in prose and narrative, and that you can see that higher level thinking of how they're assembling language, or maybe even the opportunity to learn a language, which we don't necessarily have for all of our kids until they get to middle school. So I think just getting back to Carrie's point that we want to have at least an understanding or some staff understanding of what to do when you encounter a student at that level. Like I said, I think in high school it's a little more self-guided but supported by the guidance counselors. But I think a lot of things are presented to students in middle school that maybe they don't have the opportunity to experience in elementary.
Right, I would agree with that.
Okay, so there's no rush on this.
No, I think this was good conversation. I took some notes, and we'll go back and work on some revisions and bring it back at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. It was a great update. Thank you very much.
Great.
And Jamie, you're going to stay with us for the next topic, which is assessment communication overview.
As Jamie's pulling that up, I can just intro this. So since it's the beginning of the year, we wanted to take a few moments to just really summarize and share out with you and others just our assessment communication plan that we have had in place since Jamie's been in this role. There's many things that have been enhanced, and she'll share some of those tonight. Like last year, she shared the website, but we're taking it another step further this year. And so I'm excited for her to share kind of like what we've been working on in the background, but also what parents can expect throughout the whole school year.
All right. So one of the goals in the world of assessment is really to make sure, a couple of things actually, that we have a comprehensive assessment system and one that is balanced. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. And then the second one is, how are we communicating our assessment results to our families, our parents, our caregivers, and as well as like our staff. So those are going to be the main objectives for tonight that I'm going to talk about. So we're going to jump in first with what is a comprehensive assessment system and how do we know that it's balanced? So I've shared information about this a little bit in the past, but this is another way just to kind of give us an outline of what are all of the different assessments that we have happening. And I chunked them into three portions here on this slide. So we have state assessments, and you can see the various assessments that are required by our state. And the grade levels are what is in parentheses for when those assessments are administered for each grade level. Then we have our district assessments. And again, similar setup, you can see the grade levels for when what grade levels are administered, those assessments. And then we have our classroom assessments, which include our formative assessments and our summative assessments. So these assessments are really informing our instructional decision-making throughout. They're telling us what are they learning, right? So these are our checkpoints really to know what it is that our students have the knowledge of. So really a balanced assessment system includes all of these types of assessment pieces because we know that different assessments are going to give us different information. And we have to just be careful that we're not trying to pull information from an assessment that was never meant to give us that kind of information. So what's highlighted on this screen is, so in the upper right is actually a screenshot from our assessment website. So below here is a condensed version of all of the different assessments, again, organized by state, district, for when they happen within our school year. So this is actually available for parents to access so they can get kind of a scope and sequence of when these assessments are administered throughout the year. So you can see the arrow is linking where that can be found on the assessment website. So I'm going to share some additional pieces that we have that show and communicate this information in a different way. So one of the first things that we do is before district testing takes place, a district letter is sent out. This is usually approximately a week before testing is completed. So families, again, depending on whatever grade level their student is in, they would receive that specific letter assigned to that test. And following this, principals will write in their newsletters when they can expect that test to be administered. So they are providing specifics around the test date. So after testing is done, parents and families will get another district letter and will send individual student reports home. So you can see there are two examples here on the screen. One is from the Wisconsin Forward exam, and the other one is the ACT student report. So after these things are done, then these assessment results will go into the Infinite Campus Parent Portal. So this is new this year. So we've been working hard to make sure we get assessment results in the Parent Portal. So parents last spring received a letter from me indicating how they can access specifically the forward results. And then again, we've been working on getting other assessments into IC. So we've made a lot of progress with that to make sure that especially our state assessments are in the parent portal. Parents also got directions as far as how to access that parent portal.
I just want to jump in and just share that one of the difference between the information that they get with the individual student results is you see it's very graphically appealing. We can't mimic that in Infinite Campus, but what we do have in there is the students' like scale score, and it's blurred out now, but you can see the students like percentile and that sort of thing. So what's in Infinite Campus is not as visually appealing as the individual student results, but that's why we send those home, and then working to have Infinite Campus at least have the minimal scores, so that we can go back and look at over time how the student has progressed.
All right, and then lastly, after those results are sent home and the parents receive letters about testing, those letters then go on our assessment webpage, again, as another reference, so parents can refer back to the assessment website, just as far as like what was the communication that was sent out. So there's kind of a running record of that communication there. All right, so that was just a very brief update of the current state of our communication. Any questions?
Mrs. Koenig,
That's not a question, but I just want to say how,
can you grab your microphone?
sorry. I just want to mention how I love how organized this is. I love the access. I love the transparency. You know, for a parent, there is no guesswork anymore. I mean, they can go right to their individual student. I also like on the assessment page that they are able to see, you know, the report cards of schools, you know, in the district. I mean, that's important, you know, and that transparency is huge, and I really appreciate all that's been done to make that. And with Infinite Campus now, I love the progress. This has come so far since even just being a parent myself and a teacher, and I just appreciate how easy it is now for people to find information.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
I just had one really quick question. I love the new. The new is very good. Can you just clarify, did you say you're adding historical to it, or is this a go forward?
For what's in IC?
Yes.
It's go forward.
Okay.
Yeah. If we are able to get some of the historical data, we can put that in there. It's just whether or not that's available to us to do.
A little greedy on my behalf? No, this was great. Thank you.
Just a clarifying question. Is there an intent that there's a section in Infinite Campus that says assessments, or is it coming in the messages, the test scores?
I think parents would click under more. You have to scroll down. That was me
Under
scrolling.
assessments under more?
Under
So-
more, and then it should have assessments or parent portal right there.
Yep, okay. And that's there. So at least to the most recent stuff. One of the things we've experienced as parents is that some teachers really like to send daily communications that come in the messages, and others don't. And so, and those also come as email. And so there's some duplication depending on how you do registration in terms of what messages parents get. So you mentioned like the communication around the assessments. I think those communications sometimes get lost in whatever the messages are, sorry about that. So there may be something, or maybe a more strategic time to do that than when parents get flooded with certain classroom communications.
Yeah, we can definitely work with principals. We already do work with principals on this. Jamie meets with them, and then what they do is they're planning out 2 months in advance of, hey, district is going to send this letter on this date. Everyone, can you agree to send it this next week and include your schedule? I mean, I think what we could add on, just with that feedback that you just gave, is, hey, and P.S., teachers, how about we minimize the other messages that go out that week? But they also, principals then put it in their newsletter as well. So we are trying to get principals or parents the message multiple ways.
It's great, because those pieces of paper just get lost to the pile in the kitchen. Very good. Anything else? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Speaking of technology.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Our next item on the agenda is an update on the Waukesha One program.
Yeah, so Special thanks to our instructional technology group that's here tonight. I'll have them introduce themselves. Some of you participated in some of the Waukesha One work this last school year, and so we really wanted to come forward and just highlight the work that's been done and talk about where we've been and where we're going. And so I'll turn it over to the group, and they can introduce themselves. Brian, do you want to start? Or whoever.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Yearling, one of the instructional tech coordinators, and we're really happy to be here and share the progress and some of the shifts that we've made in programming, but also the work that has come with a whole group of colleagues who have been part of this work, especially in the last year and a half, in an interesting way. So we're really excited to share some of those pieces with you tonight. So what you see here, this Waukesha History and Future Forward, I get the
There
opportunity.
you go. Can they introduce themselves?
Oh, they can. They can. Go ahead. Thanks.
My name is Brianna Beadle, one of the other members of the ITC team.
And I'm rounding it out, Kristen Bruchot, the third member of the team.
All right, I'll go ahead now. So what I want to share with you, though, is what you're looking at is a graphic that we have used really over the last year and a half, 2 years, with a team of leaders that we've brought together across the district of a wide variety of positions and perspectives and background in the district. And we called that our Waukesha One History and Future Forward team. So Waukesha One was initially branded when we first rolled out our one-to-one with the iPads. And quite honestly, the first set of those went out about 12 years ago. We're saying last year we celebrated our 10th year because that was our full implementation of everybody having the devices. But what you see here is a purpose statement that was written by that group over months of ongoing work and reforming it, rethinking it, but I think it's important to at least read. So the purpose of our Waukesha One work is to shape a future-ready, tech-enabled vision for teaching and learning, focusing on student success, teacher growth, and adapting to the digital landscape while strengthening Waukesha One's impact and empowering educators and learners. And a lot of times when people come to the work of Waukesha One, they see iPads, they see MacBooks, and that boils down for a lot of them to the work that we do. But I'll just say when we first started this journey 12 years ago, we had a graphic in our intro slides. We presented it to the board meeting there. You see Dan Warren, the board president at the time. And the graphic was a dump truck with a bunch of iPads in the back of it. And we said, there it is, backed up. We dumped them off. Here they are. Our test scores didn't get better overnight. Everything doesn't just get fixed because the iPads are here. It's about what we do from that point forward that really empowers the Waukesha One brand. And that's why we branded it the way that we did, rather than just our one-to-one program. At that time, he and the board were in a state where they had to make what he called a visionary decision, right? That question of, is this really the right move forward? And we're thankful that they made that decision. And I think as we talked to a lot of our educators and our students, he said, sometimes boards have to make visionary decisions, and the visionary decision that we have to make is this going to be the delivery system of the future? And 12 years ago, the iPad was new, right? So that was a question that we definitely encountered at that point. And what we think we've done in that work is really start, especially with the digital skills gap. We know that we have many students in our system who don't have access to the digital productivity, creativity tools that really will prepare them for the future. And you're going to hear more about that as we talk tonight. I'm just going to go forward through that.
All right, so fast forward to 10 years in, and we look at how has the technology impacted our learning environments. And the reality of it is that it's significantly impacted our learning environments, empowering both students and staff to become invested in their learning. Technology has essentially become our everyday delivery system. The tech that we put into every single one of our classrooms, in our teachers' hands, in our student hands, it enhances learning environments and the development of those critical digital skills. It allows for our teachers and our students to exist in flexible and adaptable learning formats to meet the diverse needs of our learners in the classrooms. It encourages our teachers to go out and to try new and innovative teaching practices, and it prepares our students to be future ready. Teachers in this district, students in this district are empowered to choose the right tool for the right learning at the moment, and that is solidly grounded in innovation, but more importantly, in instructional practice and purpose.
So another part of the work that we did with this team is starting to look forward and what is the state of the state, where are we going? So looking at the school district of Waukesha vision, really trying to ensure that we're developing community college and career ready students. And what does that mean from the lens of the Waukesha One team? You can see a graphic that we've shared a lot with this team. It is from the World Economic Forum. It is global data that shows employers, value in different skills. So this is across all different areas of workforce across the world. What are the skills that employers are saying are going to be most critical in the coming years? This one is actually slightly updated than the one that we've most recently shared with that team. But this aligns directly with our vision here in Waukesha of how are we ensuring that our students are able to be analytical thinking and resilient and all of these different skills that we know they're going to need when they leave us in our system. So our technology integration ensures that the students practice these skills that are identified as in demand in authentic and meaningful ways.
So when you're working in a system this large and you're working in a system where you don't always have vision into every classroom every day, you have to start looking at how can you evaluate the progress of any program that you put in place. And so since day one, we have done an evaluation through our technology profile. So this is a teacher-facing survey, and teachers across, it's a pretty in-depth survey, I'll tell you. They spend a good amount of time looking at it, for those of you who've looked at it. And so what we really used it for, though, is to help us start to understand our trajectory. So understanding in the different categories, and this is largely based on some research from the Apple Classrooms of Tomorrow research that was done 15, 20 years ago, which is where we started the survey from. But it really is starting to give us a telltale sign of where are the places where we need more professional development, where are the places where teachers are starting to see growth in areas that maybe we hadn't seen before. A good example of this might be a few years back when we started to implement the digital curriculum, right? Have your digital curriculum. And we started seeing teachers who were telling us more about how they were using more online testing platforms as a result of pretty clearly the curriculum that we had purchased. So we start to understand what are the impacts of decisions that we make and the resources that we provide for teachers and students. So we have an ongoing survey that we have watched very closely every year, and this just gives you an idea of some of the ways that we evaluate the effectiveness of the program.
And the continuous work of Waukesha One does not happen in isolation. It requires the key intersection of key stakeholders throughout our learning community to guide our interests in many avenues and to help inform decision-making for the next 10 years to come. So over about the last 2 years, the work of the Waukesha One Committee has been guided by a steering committee. And this committee was a multifaceted group of individuals, all kind of coming from different areas of our district to help bring in their perspectives, and they were dedicated to helping shape the future of technology integration in SDW. So there were 4 main areas in which our work focused: adoption and implementation, student experience, supporting teaching and professionals, and outreach. And each of these 4 areas really worked very hard, or these 4 teams worked really very hard to ensure alignment between district goals, classroom practice, and then evolving trends in technology. This team essentially serves as our bridge to connect the vision, strategy, and implementation of our one-to-one initiative throughout the district, now, tomorrow, and into the future.
So one example of the work coming from that committee and then actually moving forward into implementation or into practice. The board decided, obviously, with the policy change in March for the academic honesty policy and AI policy. So knowing that, there was an admin training in early August that came up with these kind of, we believe, statements as a part of that, and then following that up with a staff training in late August. So understanding that that AI policy has driven us to ensure that our use of AI is a cultural shift, not just a technological shift. It's not just a tool, it is something that is changing the way that we do education. And that our policies and training are grounded in the belief that we have to teach this ethical use of AI and responsible use of AI, not just a blanket statement over everything. So by preparing our staff and students, especially our admin, then following with staff and eventually our students as well, we're ensuring that the AI tools that we are using are enhancing our learning, not undermining that authentic learning.
So one of the committees that Kristen mentioned was the outreach committee, and one of the challenges we think we've probably endured over the last 10 years is not doing a great job of telling our story widely enough. We have some pretty incredible outcomes happening in our district. We have great experiences for students, but we don't tell that story widely enough. And so one of the goals of the outreach committee was how do we spread the good work that we are doing? And so there you can see again, when you get a group of people together and they start brainstorming, how can you actually share those stories? You get examples like we see here. Last year we ran a student contest, Why I Love My District device, and it was really just putting an opportunity for students to put a 1-minute video together. We put it on Blackboard and we left it from there. And we had over 50 submissions at all grade levels. We had students across the district who actually met with Mr. Sloman. They won, their video was selected and they won Logitech Crayon as a part of that. We are currently we've got 10 episodes of the One Take podcast. So another way that we're starting to get stories out about people within our system and how they are using that technology, but also more meaningfully how they're giving students opportunities to grow those digital skills that we know that they need when we look at things like the World Economic Forum and what employers are looking for. We can see it in our purchases in libraries, in buildings, whether that's the VR sets, whether that is sets of styluses that are available. We have flight simulators that have come in. None of these things are just done by the tech department. And that's why Waukesha One is such an important part of our branding and our belief system, because it really is about people like Molly Haubenschild bringing in those flight simulators, and our librarians making purchases that move us in a direction that create opportunities for students to have these rounded out and robust tech experiences. We have lots of opportunities for professional learning. We have, we're working from the lens of accessibility with our special education aides, our special education teachers, because we give our students a tool that is accessibility approved in so many ways for so many students. We don't need to have a special device for students. They already have it in their hands and it works for everybody. And then, of course, we have our media publications. Last year, we had the district newsletter go out in multi-part series. We have had opportunities to meet with the newspaper. So I think we're doing a better job of telling the story of the great work that we know is happening within the system. And I think we're really excited about the idea that when we think about Waukesha One History and Future Forward, we're pulling together this steering committee team that is really starting to say, where do we go in the next 10 years? And that's really the great opportunity. We've had a great 10-year run, but what do we do next? And that's where you start to get that AI policy and some of the other forward-looking pieces of our program that really are energizing the work that we do. So we're really thankful for that work. Anything else?
I'll just do a shameless plug that we're going to bring back some parent technology sessions. This is work of one of our groups from Waukesha One, but we also took the topic to Dr. Siebert's Superintendent Parent Council and got input from that group as far as what they would like to see in like a tech session for parents. We talked about even online or in person, and then topics. And so this is a parent session that we're advertising in our newsletter that will be out in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be putting it on Facebook. But all parents are welcome to join. It will be district-wide, and so all are welcome. And this is just one of the ways that we're going to help bring parents along with the technology that our students have in their hands.
Who will be leading those sessions? You guys? Okay, great. Great. Questions? Mr. Brooks?
Thanks. So I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about the, integrating AI into the classroom piece, because obviously we know AI is not going away. We passed our policy earlier this year, and we kind of had this conversation of, you know, we need to educate kids on how to use this because it's going to be part of their life. You're right. Employers are just clamoring for people who understand how to use this. Our friends down the road at WCTC, you know, they have a great applied AI program and they can't keep up with the demand for it. But we also, you know, my concern is always we can't let AI be a replacement for, you know, intellectual property and for student success. It's supposed to be something that can help amplify it and be on top of that, but not a replacement. And, you know, you see how quickly some of these AI programs are developing. It's developing faster than we as a board will be able to keep up with it policy-wise. And so how do we ensure that, you know, kids aren't handing over their intellectual growth to a machine, and that they're not just like replacing critical thinking skills because they trust an algorithm more than their own thoughts?
I think, first of all, there's no easy answer to that, right? We're all kind of learning together. I think the more that we inform ourselves and the more that we learn about AI and the processes by which our staff and our students unit use it, the better off we are. MIT just released a huge brain study on the use of AI in writing, and when you really dissect that study and you look at, like, what does it really tell us in the field of education, and we start thinking about that, it tells us what I think we as teachers already know, right? When students exempt themselves from doing the hard work, learning suffers, right? And I think that's what that study tells us about AI too. We have to teach our students how to use AI, that it's out there, so they're informed about it. But then we also need to guide them in their reflection and their use of it and when it's appropriate to use it. We know that students, in order to take away that critical thinking, have to kind of sit with the problem. They have to sit with the struggle of what they're doing, the learning of what they're doing. And before we can move them into, like, hey, let's jump here and try this AI out. Like, this could help you do this. We've got to sit in the struggle of whatever it is, whatever learning task it is, to make sure that we're getting those skills and we're not choosing to excuse ourselves from the heavy lifting of doing the work. And then how then do we artfully, as teachers and as students, bring those pieces back in so that they learn the ins and outs and they are still prepared for the future. And certainly it also includes working with our staff in order to get them comfortable with using AI, and so that they understand, like, when's an appropriate time to introduce something like this to my students? What part of the learning process do I want to use this, and what parts of the learning process would it not be okay, because I really need to know what my kids know without the assistance of any type of technology. So certainly it's about educating our staff about, like, how do we design learning experiences? How do we design experiences when we're not grading for a final product, but rather we're grading the process along the way, which demonstrates the learning. And there's so many different things that we can try and that we can help build skills for our teachers and for our students. And we're really just kind of on the tip of this iceberg and really getting to do these learning opportunities with staff. I got to lead a session on AI at Summer Institute, which I was blown away with the level of participation. I led the session at all three levels and had full, jam-packed people who were engaged, ready to learn, and not because they were there for the efficiency that AI brings us all. It does, right? But they were there because they want to learn how to use the AI to meet the needs of their students, and learning the technology is what really, like, gave them a spark at Summer Institute, and they were like, wow, I spent hours trying to, like, create something that I could differentiate by student, and now I can use this piece of technology that can help me create something instantly, and I can really focus on the kids in this room and being there one-on-one with the students who need a different type of support. So there's not one answer. It's all of the things, and it's kind of trial and error, seeing what sticks, and then when it doesn't stick, reiterating and coming back, and what's the next iteration of what we can offer our staff and students. You guys want to add?
Well, I think the applause probably goes to the board, the administration, for selecting a pathway for the academic integrity policy that tries to strike a balance between, we know it's here, we accept that it's part of the tools that we use, but we also give the opportunity for teachers to really be thoughtful about what is it I'm trying to teach when the AI is supportive of that outcome. What is it that I'm trying to teach? We can use it. And at the same point, we can have times where the real academic struggle a student's got to work through has to be without the AI, and teachers can say that as well. In an era where we are trying to figure it out as we go, that's a policy that lets us play both sides of that fence pretty well and puts the decision-making power into the hands of our teachers while also not hanging our students out to dry with, a policy that says not ever at any point is this acceptable. And I think that's a fair balance at this point while we're trying to understand more about what's in front of us.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
I'm actually impressed that you got your presentation in 5 slides, because after going through all of the great work that has been done over the course of the work for sure over the last year, it's remarkable. And I think for somebody coming in on the outside and, looking at technology, it's very easy to get misconstrued as to the balance between the iPad is in the student's hands too much versus what you see happening in the classroom. And if you haven't been able to be in a classroom where you can watch a teacher move from shifting instruction to every iPad in the room to no iPad to a screen up here and navigating the messaging on all of that, I think it's really, really remarkable. But the scope of it, the Waukesha one has been really impressive, at least for me, just to see what is going on. And it's not just some of the ideas that come out, because the group and the steering committee, what came out of that is remarkable. These parent digital sessions, I want us to think about that. We're in a generation where our students are understanding and learning technology at a far pace that adults just are not. And how that works and where it goes and how we bridge all of that. You guys have done just a tremendous job of how to make this balanced but effective for that, and embracing those that don't necessarily want to sign up for the change and the challenge of, I've been in a classroom for 30 years and this is hard. But the joy that I get to see when I see some of them embrace it and showing what they can do, I think is really cool. And just overall, this expands beyond just the instruction. It's everything. And it's integrating with every department within the district, but then within every home in the district. And that is a story of why I think this is so special. So you guys did a great job. 5 slides was really impressive. There's much, to your earlier point, there's so much more to tell that we need to keep telling.
Sounds like the presentation was longer when it started, yeah. Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. I won't beat up on the World Economic Forum, although I would like to. But the data you use to look at what employers are looking for in students, obviously coming up the ranks. What do you, what have you heard from local employers? Even, I know we've got a great partnership with a lot here in town, but just from other companies and, places like CTC, and what do you hear from them as to the type of skills they're looking for, if anything, and how that could factor into some of this?
It's, to your point, right? So you can pick any number of sources to figure out how you're going to get feedback on that. I think we realize our blind spot is we're not an industry, and so we have to understand what are the skills that they're looking for. What we find comforting is that what we see in the World Economic Forum feedback as far as top skills are the same things that when we talk to employers, when we talk to colleges, when we look to recruiters, right, in any post-secondary, they're looking for the same kinds of things. They're looking for someone who can be thoughtful, well, first of all, show up on time, right? Like, there are those pieces, but then be thoughtful, that critical thinking, being a creative problem solver, can talk to other human beings, right? Like, those are the things that we have heard. As teachers, we believe those things to be really the great value that we provide in the classroom. And so when you see that echoed in something like the World Economic Forum, you get a good feel like, okay, we're on the right path. what we really needed was something that gave us a scope across just one type of industry. We had to look at something that was a little bit bigger, and some of our partners, right, on the vendor side also use the World Economic Forum. So that's why we went down that path. But I think when you talk to locals, local business owners, when you talk to our CTE coordinator, we get the same feel in the work that we do on that end as well. That we need really good quality humans who show up for work and do the best work that they can do. And when we give we talk a lot about the difference between active and passive learning. That's one of the big takeaways from the history and future forward sessions is this idea that if we just put kids in front of a device and they just consume, if they're just passive learners, they're not developing any of the skills that we actually need and that employers are actually looking for and that the society actually wants, right? We need that same student to look at that device and say, how can I turn this into a tool that can get my voice out, can get my message across, can be right for the audience that I'm working with? And that's when we really talk about why we are proud to have the iPad as part of our program, because we have a tool that actually really is flexible. It's the multi-tool that can do the passive reading when you need that, and then also create the video or the voice memo or whatever it might be.
Thank you.
I appreciate the update. I know how much time went into putting a lot of these building blocks together. Over the last few years, we've had lots of conversations about how many applications do we really need and how do we make sure that we're not just kind of throwing things out there and without making sure that they kind of align to curriculum. Maybe some of the earlier discussions we had tonight to merge to this. Like we've done a lot as a district to reduce but create consistency in the curriculum that we have. I appreciate the work you all have done on the apps. And even like this morning or this week, seeing the communication around, okay, teachers, if there's something that you need, this is how we can get that to you, as we're kind of making sure that we're turning everything on. I think in the space where you all work, it's always going to be that, right? How do we make sure that we can be accessible and do things as needed, but also, maybe we're not doing everything simultaneously. So I appreciate the delicate balance of all of that. In terms of what we're putting in our kids' hands, as a parent, I would very much like for all of the devices to go away and never come back, but that's not reality. As someone, I remember back in grad school a long time ago, and I'm saying to my grad school colleagues, like, I'll be happy when this whole computer fad is over because then we can all finally get some work done. And that never happened, right? So learning how to embrace technology, I think, is as important an educational skill that we're giving our students as it is learning how to operate without it. And when I think about the people that I've interviewed over the years and as a manager or as an employer and what we want people to do, right? We hire people to problem solve or to content create. And so there's different ways in doing that, right? And we can use these tools to solve a specific problem or to provide an analysis. But when we really want to do analytical thinking, when you want to do the more advanced things, like you have to progress your understanding of the problem with the technology or the technology isn't going to serve you very well, right? So I think those are the things that we have to kind of shift our educational strategies around. How do we learn with the technology and not instead of or in place of. So I like that what we're doing, especially at the early grades, is a lot more consumables. It's those hands-on things. But we know kids are going to have access to mom's phone in the grocery store and the iPad and the things that we can't necessarily avoid. So again, as much as I'd kind of like to see those things go away, I think it's more teaching that appreciation for what it feels like to sit outside and hold a book in your hands, and that's it's still something that we do, and there's something very special about that experience. So the complementary technology, I think, is really kind of what I'm getting at. And then, we were just talking about some of our advanced learners, and I had the opportunity to attend an AI conference back in February where some developers were actually talking about how they program the AI. I think those are important things to help our students understand too, because they're programmed to get an answer, not necessarily to get the answer. And so there's lots of performance standards that go into that programming and those algorithms that say, well, if you can't figure it out in less than this many nanoseconds, then just provide the answer that you have. And that's anybody who spent a little bit of time with ChatGPT has had that frustration of like, I know this isn't the right answer, but I can't get it to get the right answer, right? So I think that's a part of that education. I think that's maybe as a parent or thinking, how we're interacting with parents around understanding technology, those would be things also to help those who maybe didn't grow up with all of these pieces. And I think there is a genuine fear or misunderstanding sometimes with AI, or even just an over-reliance on, I'm just going to get the right answer every time. And we've all seen some more recent horror stories about how that can go so wrong. So I would love to see, strategies going forward for how we bring some of that knowledge and understanding of how the technology is working into the education standards that our kids understand. Like, I can't just ask it for the answer and expect it to be right. So, and I think those of us who embrace it and learn how to use it to our advantage are gonna do much better than those who don't. So, or just take it at face value either. So, but I think the technology that we have, it's a gift and it's something that our community supports financially, and so we need to be responsible with how we incorporate that. And I know there's a lot of strategies that go in at the elementary level too, in terms of the responsibility and digital citizenship that I think is also really important. So, anything else? Anything else that you want to leave us with, or?
Thanks. We really appreciate the opportunity. We're very proud of the work, so it's really nice to talk about it with people who are seeing the depth of the work and how much it impacts our community and our students. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. It shows in the quality of work, so thank you. That leaves us with one final question, which is, are there any recommendations for future meeting agenda items? Okay. Seeing none, I guess that concludes our business for this evening, and we will be back here on some Tuesday in October. Thank you, Dr. Siebert. That's correct. Thank you for the clarification. Thursday, October 2nd. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.